One wrong step was all it took for the music to die. Lady Isolde Kincaid walked into the grandest ballroom of the London season wearing diamonds to distract from the shadows beneath her eyes and a smile that felt like shattered glass. Underneath her silk gloves, her wrists were violet. Beneath her bodice, her ribs screamed in protest. She believed she was invisible, just another pawn in a cruel aristocrat's game. But she was wrong. Across the crowded floor, Sebastian Blackwood, the Duke of Ashcroft, a man rumoured to have a heart of ice, wasn't looking at her smile. He was staring at the way she flinched. And before the night ended, he wouldn't just bow, he would kneel, and all of London would hold its breath. London, May 1819. The Kincaid townhouse on Grosvenor Square. The reflection in the gilded looking-glass told a lie, and for that, Lady Isolde Kincaid was grateful. At 22, Isolde possessed the kind of classic beauty that poets usually liken to dawn or fresh snow. Pale skin, raven hair, and eyes the colour of winter violets. But tonight, as her maid, Martha, tightened the laces of her corset, Isolde did not feel like a dawn. She felt like a ruin. "Careful, Martha," Isolde whispered, the air hissing through her teeth. Martha's hands froze. The older woman, who had nursed Isolde since she was a babe in the cradle, lowered her eyes to the angry, mottled bruise blossoming across Isolde's lower ribs. It was an ugly mix of saffron and indigo, a souvenir from 3 days prior when Lord Archibald Sterling had decided that Isolde's hesitation to sign the marriage settlements was an insult to his patience. "He is a beast, my lady," Martha murmured, her voice trembling as she dabbed a sponge soaked in rosewater and lead powder over a smaller, darker mark near Isolde's collarbone. "We should send for the magistrate. Or your uncle in York." "My uncle in York is the one who sold me to him," Isolde reminded her, her voice hollow. She winced as the silk of her emerald gown slid over her skin. "And as for the magistrate, Archibald dines with the Chief Justice every Tuesday. No, Martha, there is no escape through the law. The law belongs to men like Sterling." Isolde looked back at the mirror. She had applied the heavy French paste to her cheekbone, where the back of Archibald's signet ring had grazed her. With the powder set and her hair piled high in intricate curls threaded with gold ribbon, the mark was invisible. To the world, she was the lucky fiancée of the season's wealthiest viscount. To herself, she was a walking corpse waiting for the earth to cover her. "Why go tonight?" Martha asked, fastening the diamond choker that felt dangerously like a collar. "You could claim a migraine. You could stay in bed." "Because Beatrice comes out next season," Isolde said, the name of her younger sister acting as the steel in her spine. "If I do not appear, Archibald has threatened to turn his attentions to her. He said I am damaged goods, and perhaps a younger model would suit his temperament better." Isolde turned, gripping the dressing table. "I will dance on broken glass before I let him look at Beatrice." There was a heavy knock at the door. It wasn't a request for entry. It was a command. The door swung open, and Lord Archibald Sterling filled the frame. He was handsome in the way a cliff edge is handsome, striking, sharp, and perilous. His blonde hair was perfectly coiffed, his cravat tied in the intricate matam knot. He smiled, but the expression did not reach his pale, watery eyes. "You look exquisite, my dear," Archibald said, stepping into the room. Martha curtsied deeply and scurried into the shadows, terrified. He walked toward Isolde, reaching out to touch her chin. Isolde forced herself not to flinch. It took every ounce of willpower she possessed to keep her breathing even. "I trust the blemishes have faded," he whispered, his thumb pressing hard against her jawline, right over a tender spot. "They are concealed, my lord," Isolde said, her voice steady. "Good." He released her, wiping his thumb on his glove as if she were unclean. "Tonight is the Wetherby Ball. The Duke of Ashcroft will be in attendance. I have business interests with him, shipping lanes in the East Indies. You will be charming. You will be radiant. and you will help me secure his favor if you embarrass me, Isolde." He let the sentence hang in the air, heavier than the chandeliers awaiting them. "I understand," she said. "Excellent." He offered his arm. "Shall we? The carriage awaits. Try not to limp. It ruins the line of the gown." The carriage ride to Lady Weatherby's estate in Mayfair was a study in suffocating silence. The carriage was new, smelling of expensive leather and varnish, a testament to the fortune Archibald had amassed, partly through inheritance, partly through ruthless gambling debts he collected with violent efficiency. Isolde stared out the window at the gas lamps flickering in the London fog. She ran through her mental inventory. Her ankle was swollen, likely sprained from when he had shoved her down the stairs of the townhouse foyer. Her ribs ached with every jolt of the carriage wheels against the cobblestones, but her face was perfect. Her mask was intact. "They say Ashcroft is looking for a wife," Archibald mused, breaking the silence. He was adjusting his cufflinks, not looking at her. Though God help the woman who takes him. They call him the Wolf of Ashcroft for a reason. Cold-blooded. Killed a man in a duel in Vienna, or so the rumors say. Isolde had heard the stories. Sebastian Blackwood, the Duke of Ashcroft. He was one of the few men in England whose wealth eclipsed Archibald's. He was a war hero from the Peninsular Campaign. A man who had returned from the continent with a limp of his own and a reputation for absolute ruthlessness in the House of Lords. "I shall endeavour to be pleasant to him," Isolde said softly. "You will be more than pleasant." "You will distract him while I speak to his investors," Archibald snapped. The carriage rolled to a halt. The noise of the ball washed over them even before the footman opened the door. The strains of a waltz, the chatter of the ton, the clatter of horses. As Isolde stepped down, pain shot up her left leg, sharp and hot. She stumbled just a fraction. Archibald's hand clamped onto her upper arm, his fingers digging into the soft flesh like talons. To the onlookers, it looked like a solicitous fiancé steadying his bride. In reality, he was grinding her muscle against the bone. "Smile," he hissed in her ear. Isolde smiled. It was a grimace dressed in red paint, but it passed. They ascended the grand staircase. The ballroom was a kaleidoscope of pastel silks, military uniforms, and blinding candlelight. Lady Weatherby, their hostess, greeted them at the top of the stairs, dripping in sapphires. "Lord Stirling, and the lovely Lady Isolde," Lady Weatherby chirped. "You look pale, my dear. Is the air too thin up here in the stratosphere of society?" Isolde opened her mouth to speak, but Archibald answered for her. "She is merely overcome by the beauty of your home, Lady Weatherby. Isolde is a delicate flower." "Indeed," Weatherby said, her eyes darting away, uninterested. They moved into the crush. Isolde felt the eyes of the ton on her. She knew what they whispered. "Lucky girl. Stirling is so attentive. He never leaves her side." They didn't know he never left her side because he was her jailer. "Wait here," Archibald commanded, spotting a group of politicians near the punch bowl, "and stand up straight. None." Isolde moved to the edge of the room, near a heavy velvet curtain. She needed to take the weight off her ankle. She leaned slightly against a marble pillar, closing her eyes for a second, letting the facade drop. "I wouldn't lean on that if I were you. The plaster is fresh. It will ruin your silk." The voice was deep, resonant, and felt like a vibration in the floorboards. Isolde's eyes snapped open. Standing 5 feet away, obscured by the shadow of a large potted palm, was a man who looked like he had been carved out of granite and storms. He was tall, significantly taller than Archibald, with broad shoulders that strained against his black tailcoat. His hair was dark, swept back but unruly, and his eyes were a startling, piercing grey. It was Sebastian Blackwood, the Duke. Isolde straightened immediately, ignoring the scream of her ribs. She dipped into a curtsy, wincing as her ankle bent. "Your Grace, I did not see you." He didn't bow. He just watched her. His gaze wasn't lecherous like the other men. It was forensic. He scanned her face, her neck, her gloved hands. "You are in pain," he said. It wasn't a question. Isolde's heart hammered against her bruised ribs. "My shoes are new, Your Grace. Vanity is a painful sin." Sebastian stepped out of the shadows. Up close, he was terrifying. There was a scar running through his left eyebrow, giving him a permanent expression of skepticism. "I know what new shoes look like, Lady Isolde," he said, his voice dropping to a low rumble that the nearby dancers couldn't hear. "And I know what terror looks like. I saw enough of it in Spain." Isolde took a step back. "I do not know what you mean. Your breathing is shallow to avoid moving your rib cage," he observed clinically. "You are favoring your left leg, but your shoes are well broken in. I can see the crease in the satin from here. And you are gripping your fan so tightly, your knuckles are white. Yet you haven't fanned yourself once." Isolde felt naked, stripped of her armor. Panic rose in her throat. If Archibald saw her talking to the Duke, if he thought she was complaining. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Please, just look away." Sebastian's eyes narrowed. For a moment, she thought he would mock her. Instead, a strange emotion flickered across his face. Rage? Sorrow? "Who did it?" he asked. "I fell," she lied. "You didn't fall." He took a step closer. The air between them crackled. "Who?" Before she could answer, a hand clamped onto her shoulder. "Ah, Your Grace!" Archibald's voice boomed, oozing false charm. He stepped between Isolde and the Duke, effectively blocking her from view. "I see you've met my intended. I hope she hasn't been boring you with idle chatter." Sebastian looked at Archibald. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The Duke did not smile. He did not offer his hand. He looked at Archibald Sterling the way a boot looks at a cockroach. "We were discussing architecture," Sebastian said, his voice flat, "and the structural integrity of things that appear solid but are actually rotting from the inside." Archibald blinked, his smile faltering for a microsecond. Quite. Well, come along, Isolde. The first waltz is beginning. We must lead." Isolde felt the blood drain from her face. A waltz, the turns, the speed. With her ankle? With his hand on her waist, pressing on the bruises? "Archibald, she started. "Now, my dear," Archibald said, his fingers digging into her bruised arm again. Isolde looked at the Duke one last time. His grey eyes were locked on Archibald's hand, gripping her arm. He saw the pressure. He saw the wince. "Go!" she mouthed silently to the Duke. "Save yourself." She allowed Archibald to drag her onto the floor. The orchestra struck up a Viennese waltz. It was fast, dizzying. Archibald pulled her close, too close for propriety. But they were engaged, so society smiled indulgently. His hand slid around her waist, his thumb finding the exact spot between her third and fourth rib where the bone was bruised. He pressed. Isolde gasped, tears springing to her eyes immediately. "You were speaking to him for too long," Archibald whispered, smiling as he spun her. "What did you say?" "Nothing," she gasped, trying to keep her footing. He asked about the house." "Liar!" He spun her harder. The centrifugal force made her ankle scream. "Did you tell him? Did you try to play the victim?" "No, Archibald, please, you're hurting me." "I own you, Isolde. Remember that. Your father's debts are mine. Your sister's future is mine. You are nothing without me." He whirled her around. The ballroom became a blur of lights. Isolde's vision started to tunnel. The pain in her side was a hot knife. The pain in her ankle was a grinding agony. "I am going to faint," she thought. "I am going to fall, and he will kill me for the humiliation." Across the room, standing by the punch bowl, Sebastian Blackwood was not drinking. He was watching. He saw the subtle hitch in Isolde's step. He saw the way her jaw clamped shut to stifle a cry. He saw the sadistic glint in Sterling's eyes. Sebastian set his glass down on a passing tray. The crystal shattered. He had set it down so hard. "Your Grace?" a nearby dowager asked, startled. Sebastian didn't answer. He began to walk onto the dance floor. He didn't walk around the dancers. He walked through them. Couples parted like the Red Sea before the dark intensity of his approach. He moved with a predator's grace, his eyes locked on the spinning emerald dress. On the floor, Isolde stumbled. Her ankle finally gave way. She pitched forward. Archibald snarled, jerking her up by her arm, creating a spectacle. "Clumsy cow," he hissed, low enough that only she could hear, raising his hand as if to steady her. But Isolde knew that gesture. It was a prelude to a pinch or a twist, a hidden punishment. Let her go. The voice cut through the music like a cannon shot. The orchestra didn't stop immediately, but the dancers nearby did. A hush rippled outward from the center of the floor. Archibald froze. He turned to see Sebastian Blackwood standing 3 feet away. The Duke looked like an executioner who had forgotten his hood. "Your Grace?" Archibald laughed nervously. "We are in the middle of a dance." "You are in the middle of a torture session," Sebastian said. His voice was loud enough to carry to the gallery. "I beg your pardon?" Archibald's face went red. Lady Isolde merely stumbled. "She is frail." "She is not frail," Sebastian said. "She is injured." Sebastian stepped into the personal space of the couple. He looked at Isolde. Tears were streaming down her face now, ruining the powder. The mask was dissolving. "Lady Isolde," Sebastian said, his voice softening instantly as he addressed her. "May I?" He didn't wait for permission. He reached out and gently, incredibly gently, took her hand from Archibald's shoulder. "Sir, this is highly irregular," Archibald blustered, stepping forward to reclaim her. "She is my fiancée." Sebastian turned his head. He didn't raise his voice, but the menace in his tone made several men in the crowd step back. "Touch her again, Sterling, and I will dismantle you, bone by bone." The music died completely. The entire ballroom was silent. 600 people were watching. "She is fine," Archibald shouted, looking around for support. "Tell him, Isolde. Tell him you are fine." Isolde looked at Archibald. She looked at the crowd. She looked at the Duke. Sebastian didn't look at the crowd. He was looking at the hem of her dress. "You cannot stand on that leg," Sebastian said. And then the unthinkable happened. The Duke of Ashcroft, the proudest man in England, the man who bowed to no one but the king, took a step back. He lowered his tall frame. He went down on one knee. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. It sounded like a sudden wind. Sebastian didn't care about the whispers. He reached out with gloved hands and gently lifted the hem of Isolde's emerald gown, just 2 inches. The silence was absolute. There, visible to the entire inner circle of the dance floor, Isolde's ankle was swollen to the size of a grapefruit, the skin turning a horrific shade of black and blue above her satin slipper. Sebastian looked up at her, still kneeling. "This is not a stumble," he said, his voice carrying clearly. "This is a break." He gently lowered her hem. He did not stand up immediately. He stayed kneeling, looking up at her, placing himself in a position of subservience to her pain. "I will not let you fall," he promised her. Then Sebastian stood up. He turned to the crowd, his face a mask of cold fury. "Lord Sterling claims his fiancée is clumsy," Sebastian announced, his voice ringing off the painted ceiling. "I claim Lord Sterling is a liar and a brute, and I intend to prove it." Archibald was shaking. You cannot prove anything. It happened on the stairs. An accident." "And the ribs?" Sebastian asked. He took a step toward Archibald. "Shall we ask a physician to examine the lady's ribs right now? Shall we ask why she is wearing enough lead powder to paint a house?" Archibald paled. He knew. Isolde felt the room spinning. The adrenaline that had held her upright was fading. The pain was overwhelming. She swayed. Sebastian was there in an instant. He didn't catch her by the arm. He swept her up into his arms, bridal style, lifting her effortlessly against his chest. "I am taking Lady Isolde to my carriage," Sebastian announced to the room. He looked at Lady Weatherby, who was staring with her mouth open. "Send for Dr. Alcott. Tell him to meet us at Ashcroft House. I will not have her treated by the quack Sterling pays off." "You can't take her!" Archibald screamed, lunging forward. "She is mine!" Sebastian didn't even turn. He simply kicked backward, a soldier's reflex. His boot connected with Archibald's knee. There was a sickening crunch. Archibald went down, screaming, clutching his leg. "Now you know how it feels," Sebastian said coldly. He looked down at Isolde, who was clinging to his lapels, half conscious. "Close your eyes, Isolde," he whispered into her hair. "The war is over." He carried her out of the ballroom, leaving the ruins of London society behind them. Isolde awoke to the smell of burning wood and antiseptic. She wasn't in her room. The ceiling was too high, painted with cherubs and storm clouds. The sheets were silk, not the linen she was used to. She shot up, gasping, but a sharp pain in her side made her cry out, "Easy, easy now." She turned. Sebastian was sitting in a wingback chair by the fire. He was no longer wearing his tailcoat. He was in a white shirt, sleeves rolled up, looking tired. A glass of amber liquid sat on the table next to him. "Where?" "Ashcroft House," he said. "My townhouse. You've been asleep for 14 hours. The laudanum the doctor gave you was potent." Isolde pulled the sheets up to her chin. Panic set in. "Archibald, he will kill Beatrice. I have to go back. If I am not there—" "Archibald Sterling is currently in the custody of the magistrate," Sebastian said calmly. He took a sip of his drink. "And your sister, Beatrice, was collected from your home 3 hours ago by my personal guard. She is currently in the West Wing, eating lemon cakes and reading a novel." Isolde stared at him, her mouth agape. You kidnapped my sister?" "I extracted a hostage," Sebastian corrected. "I sent a regiment of my old unit. They don't take no for an answer." Sterling's servants didn't put up much of a fight. Isolde sank back against the pillows. Tears pricked her eyes. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do this? You don't know me. I am ruined. Being here, in your house, unmarried. I am ruined." Sebastian stood up and walked to the side of the bed. He looked down at her, his expression unreadable. "You were ruined the moment you agreed to marry that monster," he said. "I am merely changing the nature of the ruin." "But why?" Sebastian sighed. He sat on the edge of the bed, a breach of etiquette so massive it was almost laughable given the circumstances. 3 years ago, he began, looking at his hands, "my younger sister Clara married a count from Vienna. He was charming, wealthy. Everyone said she was the luckiest girl in Europe." Isolde held her breath. "She wrote me letters, said she was happy, said she was clumsy." Sebastian's jaw tightened. "I believed her. I was busy. I was the Duke. I had responsibilities." He looked at Isolde, his grey eyes swimming with ghosts. "She died 6 months into the marriage. They said she fell from a balcony. But when I went to collect her body, I saw the bruises, the old ones, the ones powder couldn't hide." He reached out, his fingers hovering near Isolde's cheek, but not touching her. "I swore to God that if I ever saw those eyes again, the eyes of a woman hiding that kind of fear, I would burn the world down to stop it. I saw them on you tonight, Isolde." Isolde let the tears fall. She reached out and took his hand. It was large, warm, and calloused. "He has my father's debts," she whispered. £30,000. He holds the deed to our estate. If I don't marry him, he will cast my mother and Beatrice into the street." Sebastian's face hardened. A wolfish grin appeared. But this time it wasn't scary. It was vindictive. "The debts," Sebastian said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. Isolde recognized it. It was her father's promissory note. "How?" "Sterling gambles," Sebastian said, "and he is not very good at it, especially when he is in pain and angry. I have agents, Isolde, men who play cards very well. While Sterling was screaming about his knee this morning, my solicitor paid a visit to his creditors. I bought the debt." He held the paper over the candle on the bedside table. They watched together as the flame curled the edges, turning the paper to black ash. You owe Archibald Sterling nothing, Sebastian said. Technically, you owe me £30,000. Isolde stared at the ashes. I cannot pay you. I know, Sebastian said softly. So I suppose you'll have to work it out. How? Recover, he said. Get strong. Learn to walk without limping. And then we will figure out how to destroy him properly. Because breaking his knee was just the beginning. June 1819. Ashcroft House, London. The scandal did not burn out. It festered. For 3 weeks, Lady Isolde Kincaid remained within the walls of Ashcroft House. To the ton, it was a fortress of sin. To Isolde, it was the first sanctuary she had ever known. Her recovery was slow. The bruising on her ribs turned from violent violet to a sickly yellow, and the swelling in her ankle receded enough for her to limp without a cane, though Sebastian forbade her from climbing stairs. Sebastian. He was not the monster the gossips painted him to be. He was a man of quiet, intense rituals. Every morning, he joined Isolde and her sister Beatrice for breakfast in the sunroom. He didn't speak much, but he ensured Beatrice had the finest jams for her toast, and that Isolde's cushion was adjusted just so. You are spoiling us, Isolde said one rainy Tuesday, watching him peel an orange with surgical precision. We cannot stay here forever, Your Grace. The papers, they are calling me your mistress. Sebastian paused, the knife hovering over the fruit. Let them talk. While they talk, they are not looking at what I am doing to Sterling. And what are you doing to him? Starving him, Sebastian said, handing her a slice of orange. I have blocked his shipments from the West Indies. I have bought the mortgages on his 3 largest rental properties. He is bleeding money, Isolde. A man like Sterling needs money to maintain his power. Without it, he is just a brute in a fancy waistcoat. But Archibald Sterling was not merely a brute. He was a cornered animal. And on a Thursday afternoon, the animal bit back. A silver tray was brought in by Sebastian's butler, a grim-faced man named Reynolds. On it lay a letter bearing the seal of the High Court of Chancery. Sebastian broke the seal. As he read, his face, usually impassive, turned thunderous. The vein in his temple, usually invisible, began to throb. What is it? Isolde asked, her heart rate spiking. He has filed a suit, Sebastian said, his voice dangerously low, for breach of promise and alienation of affections. He claims I have kidnapped you and brainwashed you to avoid fulfilling your marriage contract. And? Sebastian stopped. And what? He has petitioned the Lord Chancellor, Lord Eldon, for a hearing. He claims you are mentally unstable, hysterical. He wants to be granted legal guardianship over you and Beatrice to protect you from yourself. Isolde felt the blood drain from her face. In 1819, a woman declared hysterical could be locked away in an asylum on the word of a male guardian. Archibald didn't just want to marry her anymore. He wanted to imprison her. He wanted to silence her before she could tell the world what he had done. He cannot do that, Beatrice gasped from the corner, dropping her book. He has friends, Sebastian said, crushing the letter in his fist. Lord Eldon is a traditionalist. He believes a betrothal is a binding contract, and Sterling has likely bribed half the court with money he doesn't have. Sebastian stood up, pacing the room like a caged tiger. If we go to court, Isolde, it will be brutal. He will bring up everything. He will try to humiliate you. He will say you seduced me. Isolde looked down at her hands. She remembered the fear in the carriage, the way Archibald had ground her bones together, the way he had looked at Beatrice. She stood up. Her ankle throbbed, but she ignored it. Let him try, she said. Sebastian stopped pacing. He looked at her. Isolde, you do not have to do this. I can get you to France. I have a villa in Nice. You and Beatrice could live there, safe. Run away. Isolde shook her head. If I run, I am guilty. If I run, he wins, and he will find another girl, another clumsy wife who falls downstairs. She walked toward Sebastian, stopping inches from him. She reached out and touched the lapel of his coat, right over his heart. You knelt for me, she whispered. Now, I will stand for myself, but I need you to stand with me. Sebastian covered her hand with his. His eyes burned with a fierce, protective light. I will stand with you until the stars burn out. July 1819. The Old Bailey. Special session. The courtroom was stiflingly hot, smelling of unwashed bodies, wool, and old parchment. It was packed to the rafters. The scandal of the Duke and the runaway bride had drawn every gossip in London. Lord Eldon sat on the high bench, his wig askew, looking bored and irritable. Archibald Stirling sat at the plaintiff's table, looking the picture of the aggrieved victim. He wore a sombre black suit, his arm in a sling, a calculated prop to garner sympathy for the assault he had suffered at the ball. Isolde sat beside Sebastian. She wore no jewellery. Her dress was a simple dove grey, high-necked and modest. She wanted them to see her, not a fashion plate. This court is now in session, the bailiff bellowed. Archibald's barrister, a oily man named Mr. Thaddeus Gryn, began his opening statement. It was a masterpiece of fiction. He painted Archibald as a loving, patient fiancé, and Isolde as a flighty, unstable woman, seduced by the wealth and power of the predatory Duke of Ashcroft. My client, Gryn boomed, pointing a bony finger at Archibald, merely sought to guide Lady Isolde. She is prone to episodes, fits of melancholia. She injures herself in her confusion. Lord Stirling only wished to protect her. He called his witnesses. A maid Stirling had fired 2 years ago, who testified Isolde often cried for no reason. A doctor, one of the quacks Sebastian had warned of, who claimed Isolde's bruises were consistent with hysterical falling. The crowd murmured. The tide was turning against her. Isolde felt the weight of hundreds of judging eyes. Then, it was time for the defence. Sebastian stood up. He did not hire a barrister. As a peer of the realm, he chose to speak for himself. My lords, Sebastian said, his voice calm, cutting through the heat. We have heard much about protection today. I would like to show you what Lord Stirling's protection looks like. He turned to the doors. Call Dr. Elcott. Dr. Elcott was the most respected physician in London, the King's own surgeon. His testimony was clinical and devastating. The injuries were not consistent with a fall, Alcott stated, adjusting his spectacles. The bruising on the ribs was shaped like a knuckles. The ankle was not merely sprained, it was crushed by vertical pressure, as if stomped upon. The crowd gasped. Archibald shifted in his seat, his eyes narrowing. And, Sebastian continued, pacing the floor, we have heard that Lady Isolde is unstable, that she imagines things. Sebastian stopped in front of Archibald's table. He leaned in. I call Lady Isolde Kincaid to the stand. A hush fell. It was highly irregular for a woman to testify in such a case. Lord Eldon frowned, but nodded. Isolde walked to the stand. Her legs shook, but her head was high. She swore on the Bible. Lady Isolde, Sebastian asked gently, why did you agree to marry Lord Stirling? Because he held my father's debts, she said clearly, and he threatened to ruin my family if I refused. Lies, Archibald shouted, jumping up. She lies. Sit down. Lord Eldon banged his gavel. And why? Sebastian continued, ignoring the outburst. Did you not leave him when he began to hit you? Because he told me no one would believe me, Isolde said, her voice trembling slightly. He said he was a pillar of society, and I was just a girl. He said the law belonged to men. She looked directly at the jury, then at the gallery, and finally at Archibald. He broke my ribs because I didn't smile quickly enough. He crushed my ankle because I spoke to your grace. He is not a protector. He is a butcher. Silence reigned. But Gryn, Archibald's lawyer, stood up with a sneer. Touching, Gryn said. But do you have proof? A diary? A witness? Or are we to take the word of a woman who is currently living in sin with the Duke? The accusation hung in the air. The living in sin comment was a heavy blow. It discredited her virtue, and thus her word. Isolde looked at Sebastian. He looked worried. They needed something more. Testimony wasn't enough against the social contract of men protecting men. Suddenly the doors at the back of the courtroom banged open. "I have a witness!" a voice cried out. Heads turned. Standing there was a young woman, heavily veiled, leaning on a cane. She was flanked by two of Sebastian's guards. She walked forward, lifting her veil. Archibald Stirling's face went white. He looked as if he had seen a ghost. "Who is this?" Lord Eldon demanded. "My name is Sarah Miller," the woman said, her voice raspy. "I was a maid in Lord Stirling's household 3 years ago." She turned to the jury. She pulled down the collar of her dress. A collective scream of horror rose from the gallery. Across her neck and shoulder was a jagged, raised scar. A brand. "He didn't just hit me," Sarah said, pointing a shaking finger at Archibald. "He branded me, because I broke a teacup. She is a dismissed servant, a disgruntled employee." Archibald screamed, panic in his voice. "This is a setup." "I have the branding iron," Sebastian said quietly, lifting a heavy object wrapped in burlap from under his table. He slammed it onto the wood. "Found in your cellar this morning, Stirling. My men are very thorough." He unwrapped it. The iron tip bore the crest of the Stirling family. The courtroom erupted. This was no longer a civil dispute. This was a criminal revelation. The sight of the iron, combined with the scarred woman and Isolde's testimony, broke the dam. Lord Eldon looked at the iron, then at Archibald. The judge's face hardened. "Lord Stirling," Eldon said, his voice like doom, "you will sit down, and you will remain silent until the constables arrive." Archibald tried to run. He scrambled over the railing, shoving his own lawyer aside. But he didn't get far. Sebastian was faster. He vaulted the table, tackling Archibald to the floor of the courtroom. The two men crashed down, but the fight was short. Sebastian pinned him, his forearm against Archibald's throat. "I told you," Sebastian whispered into Archibald's ear, loud enough for the front row to hear, "I would dismantle you." August 1819, Ashcroft House, London. The silence that followed the trial was not the peace of a meadow. It was the heavy, ringing silence of a battlefield after the cannons have ceased. Archibald Stirling was gone. The swift justice of the King's Bench, aided by the undeniable horror of the branding iron, had been absolute. He was currently in the hull of the HMS Persephone, bound for the penal colonies of New South Wales. The monster had been slain, his assets seized and liquidated to pay the debts of his victims, primarily the Kincaid family. Technically, Lady Isolde Kincaid was free. Technically, she was victorious, but as August settled over London, bringing with it a humid, suffocating heat, Isolde did not feel like a victor. She felt like a ghost haunting the corridors of Ashcroft House. For weeks, the house had been a frenzy of solicitors, runners, and doctors. Now the doors were closed. The world outside was still whispering. Scandal was a hungry beast, and though Isolde was the victim, she was also the unmarried woman living under the protection of the Wolf of Ashcroft. The Ton did not know how to categorize her, heroine or fallen woman. So they simply sharpened their knives and waited. Inside the library, the mood was even more brittle. Isolde sat by the window, a book of poetry open but unread in her lap. Across the room, Sebastian Blackwood sat at his massive mahogany desk. He was working with a fervor that bordered on manic. The scratch of his quill against parchment was the only sound in the room, a rhythmic, grating noise that seemed to count down the seconds of their remaining time together. He had been pulling away. It started the day after the verdict. The gentle touches, the shared breakfasts, the quiet moments of understanding. They had evaporated. In their place was a polite, devastating formality. He treated her not like the woman he had knelt for, but like a valued client he was preparing to discharge. "Reynolds tells me the trunks are being brought down from the attic," Isolde said, her voice sounding too loud in the quiet room. Sebastian didn't look up. Yes, the logistical preparations are nearly complete. You are really going, then? To Vienna? It is time, he said, finally dipping his quill into the inkwell and pausing. He looked at the wall, his jaw tight. I have delayed my departure for 3 months. My business in Austria and my duty to my sister's memory cannot wait forever. And us? Isolde asked. The words slipped out before she could check them. Sebastian turned his head slowly. His grey eyes were dark, guarded by walls of stone higher than any he had built before. Us, Lady Isolde? There is no us in the eyes of the law anymore. The trial is over. You are safe. My role as your protector is concluded. The rejection stung worse than Archibald's hand ever had. Archibald had hurt her body. Sebastian was breaking her heart with surgical precision. Is that all this was? She asked, standing up, ignoring the phantom ache in her healing ankle. A role, a duty, was I just another charity case to assuage your guilt over Clara? Sebastian flinched. It was microscopic, a twitch of the muscle beneath his eye, but she saw it. He stood up, abruptly, knocking his chair back. Do not do that. Do not reduce what we accomplished to simple guilt. Then tell me why you are running away, she cried, walking toward the desk. You fought the entire world for me, Sebastian. You knelt in a ballroom. You broke a man's knee. And now that the dust has settled, you cannot even look me in the eye. Because if I look at you, Sebastian growled, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous rumble, I will never leave. And I must leave. He walked around the desk, not to embrace her, but to put distance between them. He moved to the fireplace, leaning his arm against the mantel, staring into the empty grate. You do not understand, Isolde. You are free now. Truly free. For the first time in your life, you are not property. You are not a debtor's daughter. You are not a viscount's punching bag. He reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a thick, sealed envelope. He tossed it onto the low table between them. That is for you. Isolde looked at the envelope. What is it? Everything, he said. The deed to your father's estate in Yorkshire, fully paid. A dowry of £50,000 settled on you and Beatrice independently. And a letter of introduction to my aunt, the Countess of Hale. She is the most powerful matron in society. Under her wing, your reputation will be scrubbed clean within a season. Isolde stared at the packet. It was a fortune. It was a life. You are paying me off, she whispered, horror dawning on her. I am empowering you. Sebastian turned, his face anguished. Do you not see? If you stay here with me, you are ruined. I am the wolf, Isolde. I am the man who kills in duels. I am the man society fears but never loves. If you tie yourself to me, you trade one cage for another. I want you to have the one thing you have never had. Choice. He took a step toward her, his hands clenched at his sides to stop himself from reaching for her. Take the money. Go to Yorkshire. Find a gentleman who likes poetry and doesn't know how to break bones. Be happy. Isolde looked at the man she loved. She saw the twisted logic of his trauma. He believed he was toxic. He believed that his violence, even violence used to save her, made him unworthy of her peace. He was trying to be noble, and in doing so, he was shattering them both. She looked at the envelope. Then she looked at him. You think choice is a bank draft? She asked softly. It is the only choice that matters in this world. You are wrong, she said. She didn't pick up the envelope. She turned and walked out of the library, leaving him standing alone in the wreckage of his own nobility. The next evening, the conservatory. The storm broke in the late afternoon. Rain lashed against the high glass dome of the conservatory, blurring the world outside into smears of grey and green. Isolde stood among the orchids. The air here was humid, smelling of damp earth and vanilla. She had spent the day thinking about fear, thinking about safety. She realized that for years she had equated safety with the absence of pain. But safety wasn't just the absence of pain. It was the presence of trust. And she trusted Sebastian Blackwood more than she trusted the ground beneath her feet. He was leaving in the morning. The carriage was ordered for dawn. She heard the door click open. She didn't turn. "Reynolds said you were down here," Sebastian's voice came. It sounded tired. "You missed dinner." "I wasn't hungry." He walked up behind her. She could feel the heat radiating from him. "Isolde," he said gently, "I do not want to part in anger. Please, take the papers." Isolde turned around. She was wearing the same emerald dress she had worn the night of the ball. The night he had saved her. She had had it mended. The symbolism was a weapon, and she intended to use it. Sebastian stopped dead when he saw the gown. His eyes travelled over the silk, remembering the bruises that had once lain beneath it. "Why are you wearing that?" he rasped. "Because this is the dress I wore when I learned the truth about you," she said. "You think you're a monster, Sebastian. You think your hands are only good for breaking things." She took a step closer. The rain drummed harder on the glass, a chaotic rhythm. "But I remember your hands," she said. "I remember how they held my ankle when it was swollen. I remember how they carried me up the stairs without jarring a single rib. I remember how they held a glass of water to my lips when I was too weak to lift it." She reached out and took his right hand, the hand that had held the branding iron in court. She uncurled his fist and placed his palm against her cheek. "These are not the hands of a monster," she whispered. "These are the hands of the man who healed me." Sebastian squeezed his eyes shut. A shudder went through his massive frame. "Isolde, don't. I am trying to do the right thing. I am trying to save you from me." "I don't want to be saved from you," she said, her voice rising with the storm. "I want to be with you. You gave me a choice, Sebastian. You gave me the money and the freedom to go anywhere, to be anything. You wanted me to choose." She pressed her hand over his, holding it to her face. "Well, I have chosen. I choose the wolf." Sebastian's eyes snapped open. The grey was swirling with a storm of its own. Hope, terror, desire. "You don't know what you're asking," he breathed. "I am difficult. I am brooding. I wake up screaming from memories of the war. And I limp when it rains," Isolde countered. "And I cannot stand the smell of lavender, because it reminds me of Archibald. We are both broken, Sebastian. We are both cracked vessels." She moved closer, until their bodies were almost touching. "But if you put two broken pieces together, sometimes they make something stronger than the whole, something that can withstand anything." Sebastian looked down at her. The walls were crumbling. The resolve he had built up over weeks of agonizing self-denial was turning to dust in the face of her courage. "You would be a pariah," he warned one last time, though his voice lacked conviction. "Society will never let you forget." "Let them talk," Isolde said, echoing his words from weeks ago. "I don't care about the ton. I care about the man who knelt for me when no one else would even look at me." She looked at the stone floor of the conservatory. Then she did the unthinkable. Isolde Kincaid, the daughter of a viscount, gathered her emerald skirts. She lowered herself. Sebastian's eyes widened in panic. "Isolde, no!" She didn't stop until she was kneeling on the flagstones at his feet. She looked up at him, reversing the image that had started it all. "You knelt for my pain," she said, her voice clear and steady. "Now I kneel for your heart. I am asking you, Sebastian Blackwood, do not send me away. Do not make me live a safe life with a stranger. Marry me. Be my partner. Be my love." The silence that followed was louder than the rain. Sebastian stared down at her. He looked like a man witnessing a miracle. A woman, beautiful, strong, and brave, was kneeling before him, not in fear, but in love. He made a sound, half laugh, half sob. He dropped to his knees so fast it was a blur of motion. He didn't pull her up. He met her there on the floor. He framed her face with both hands, his thumbs wiping away the tears she hadn't realized she was shedding. "You foolish, wonderful woman," he whispered. "You have ruined me. I can never be without you now." "Good," she smiled, leaning into his touch. "That was the plan." "Yes," he said, fierce, his forehead resting against hers. "Yes, I will marry you. I will marry you tomorrow. I will marry you every day for the rest of my life." He kissed her then. It wasn't the tentative kiss of a courtship. It was a claiming. It was deep, hungry, and desperate. He kissed her like a man who had been starving for a lifetime and had finally found a feast. Isolde wound her arms around his neck, pulling him closer, anchoring him to the earth, anchoring him to her. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside the glass fortress, everything was calm. October 1819. The harvest ball at Lady Jersey's The Season was technically over, but the harvest ball was the true finale of the social calendar. It was the night where the final judgments of the year were rendered. The ballroom was packed. The gossip was vicious. Archibald Stirling's crimes were known, yes, but the hasty marriage of the Duke of Ashcroft to the compromised Lady Isolde was the scandal du jour. "They say she trapped him," a dowager whispered behind her fan. "I heard he bought her from Stirling," another sneered. "She won't show her face," a third declared. "She has been hiding at Ashcroft House for months." Then the major domo struck his staff against the floor. The sound echoed like a gavel. His Grace, the Duke of Ashcroft, and her Grace, the Duchess of Ashcroft. The doors swung open. The room didn't just go quiet. It went still. Sebastian Blackwood stood in the doorway. He was resplendent in black velvet, the ribbon of the garter across his chest. He looked every inch the wolf, dangerous, powerful, untouchable. But all eyes were on the woman beside him. Isolde did not look like a victim. She did not look like a woman hiding bruises. She wore a gown of silver silk that flowed like liquid moonlight, cut to expose the creamy, unblemished skin of her shoulders. Around her neck was not the tight diamond choker of her past, but a single, massive sapphire pendant. The Ashcroft sapphire, a family heirloom that had not been worn in 50 years. But her most striking accessory was her expression. She wasn't smiling to please anyone. She looked serene. She looked regal. She looked happy. They stepped into the room. The crowd parted. It wasn't the fearful parting of the Red Sea this time. It was a parting of respect, perhaps even awe. They walked to the center of the floor. The orchestra, sensing the moment, began a waltz. Sebastian turned to her. He didn't grab her. He offered his hand, palm up. A question. Isolde placed her hand in his. An answer. He pulled her close. His hand found her waist, firm, supportive, possessive in the best way. "They are staring," Sebastian murmured, a smirk playing on his lips as he swept her into the turn. "Let them stare," Isolde replied, looking only at him. "I only see you. Does your ankle hurt?" "Not at all." "Good," Sebastian said, "because I intend to dance with you until dawn." He spun her. And as the silver dress flared out, catching the light of 1,000 candles, anyone with eyes could see the truth. There were no bruises here. There was no fear. When the dance ended, Sebastian didn't just bow. He broke protocol again, just as he had that first night. He lifted her gloved hand to his lips. He kissed her knuckles, his grey eyes locking with her violet ones. "I love you, Isolde," he said, loud enough for the curious ears nearby to hear. "And I love you, Sebastian," she replied. He tucked her hand into the crook of his arm. He looked at the gaping crowd, raised a single, arrogant eyebrow, and led his wife towards the champagne. The wolf had found his mate, and the rest of the world could simply howl at the moon. What a journey! From the terrifying silence of that carriage ride to the triumphant justice of the Old Bailey, Isolde and Sebastian's story reminds us that true strength isn't about enduring pain in silence. It's about finding the voice to say no more. Sebastian didn't just save Isolde. He empowered her to save herself. If this story moved you, or if you found yourself cheering when Archibald finally got what he deserved, please give this video a thumbs up. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon. I have another historical romance coming next week involving a runaway princess and a scandalous highwayman that you won't want to miss. What was your favorite moment? Was it the Duke kneeling in the ballroom or the courtroom showdown? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching/listening, and see you in the next story.